Welcome to your Flip Learning video. 13Y, this will be new for you as you weren't doing any of the relationships Flip Learning. So for everybody else, I'm just going to give them a little bit of an introduction as to how Flip Learning will work. Normally you would see me stood in front of a board, but for this one it's going to be a voice over of the PowerPoints. There are two separate PowerPoints, one for AO1 and one for AO2. You need to have watched the first video by the first lesson of the 3. So that's normally for the start of a week. Once you've watched the AO1 video, you should be able to follow the booklet to help you make some notes, or you can make the notes totally of your own. You need to complete the 2 boxes of AO1 in your essay grid and bring it with you to the lesson. You'll then have some activities during the lesson which will help you consolidate the AO1 learning, look forward into the AO2, while I come round and mark your AO1. This will allow you to have some one-to-one time to talk to me about any issues you found during the Flip Learning. So to get us started, there are 6 topics in aggression. The first one covers the social psychological theories of aggression. The introduction to aggression asks you to think about what it is and what might cause it. Aggression is defined as a set of behaviours between members of the same species that is intended to cause pain or harm, and it is this intention that makes it an aggressive act as opposed to an act of assertiveness or competitiveness. Aggression can be physical, mental or verbal, and this will become important in some of the later essays where we start talking about control over partners being a form of aggression. It's one of the most disturbing forms of human behaviour, and during this series of lessons you should be able to see we're going to look at things like domestic abuse, prison violence and violence in children. There's a lot of argument amongst psychologists as to what causes aggression. Some argue that it's part of our evolutionary past, that it has a physiological and biological basis, that it helps us in some way. Others believe that it's more coming out of the interactions of our social world, and essentially this unit will be a big nature-nurture debate. So in this essay, there are 2 theories that we're going to consider: deindividuation and social learning theory. Social learning theory should be fairly easy for you as we've done it multiple times before. Deindividuation may be a little harder. So to start off with then, the theory of deindividuation. This theory is asking you to think about what it might be and how to track through that. It's a complicated word, you may not have come across it before, so I want you to think about the words that are in there. When you de something, it means that you're taking that away. So de-individuating means taking away somebody's individualism. It means losing your individuality and losing your identity. So de-individuation happens as a result of being part of a big crowd or identifying with a particular role that makes you lose yourself and your idea of who you are. And this, they've argued, makes you more likely to engage in antisocial behaviour. The work really started with Le Bon in 1896. You can see that the idea of de-individuation has been around for a very long time. Le Bon claimed that whilst people were in a crowd, individuals seemed to be much more likely to engage in antisocial or aggressive behaviour, and he called this the collective mindset. And he argued that they create one mindset that the group is all applying to rather than acting as individuals. The collective mindset means that we are acting together as one, and the idea behind this was that in groups individuals feel less identifiable. I want you just to think slightly what you might already know about this. It's part of the social psychological blue booklet, so think about what you know about conformity and obedience and the power of groups. We already know that we're much less likely to think about our own opinions when we're in a group. We're going to conform to the group norms. We know that we give deliberately wrong answers when in a group because we don't want to stand out from the crowd. Le Bon's work, though, argues that it also leads to a loss of inhibition, as a person's not constrained by personal and social norms that would normally prevent them from engaging in aggressive behaviour when they're alone. This is linked to work by Zimbardo, which some of you may or may not know about, and we will look briefly into Zimbardo's prison experiment. Some of you may already be aware of it. Zimbardo added to Le Bon's work, so this de-individuation theory is a collection of many psychologists' ideas. Zimbardo claimed that de-individuation occurs because people become anonymous in a large crowd. And this means that they face less risk of being disapproved of. It reduces the sense of guilt for the harm that they've caused to other people, because actually nobody knows or can identify that it was specifically them who created the harm. You need to think about the main reason in this, and it's the anonymity. It's really important in your AO1 that you are stressing that it's the idea of anonymous within a large crowd. And the two outcomes are that you don't feel like you're going to be disapproved of, nobody's going to be able to catch you out, and that you don't feel as guilty. Factors that contribute to de-individuation. I want you to think about whether or not these things have ever happened to you. Think about what you know from the blue booklet. Factors that increase anonymity are things like wearing a uniform. And if you think to your social psychological booklet, your conformity and obedience booklet of last year, the size of the group. So once you become a bigger group, the idea of anonymity is much more obvious. There is an argument as well that altered states of consciousness have an impact here, so things like drugs and alcohol, although for the purpose of this essay that's really not something we're focusing on. Most recently, the theory has been added to by Diner, who proposed that de-individuation occurs when your self-awareness is blocked by environmental events. Self-awareness being how knowledgeable you are about what you're doing, how much you're thinking about your own actions. And they suggested that what's going on in your environment can block that self-awareness that we normally have, and it results in the person feeling different and less concerned about the consequences of their behaviour. Diner argued that when in a de-individuated state, individuals act more impulsively because they're not considering their own self, they're not considering the actions and the impacts of their actions. They focus more on the external events than their own feelings, and this just increases the probability that they're going to engage in aggressive acts. And then finally, you've got the work of Prentice, Dunn and Rogers, and they really refined the concept. So de-individuation was quite a crude idea, and over the years this concept has been really refined. They distinguished between the effects of public self-awareness, which is being anonymous to other people, very linked into Zimbardo's ideas, and reduced private self-awareness, which is your own loss of personal identity. Reduced public self-awareness can occur when you're part of a crowd. So for the de-individuation, you need to be talking about the two types. Zimbardo's work mainly focused on reduced public self-awareness and talks about the fact that you're anonymous in the crowd. This means you can't be identified. You're less likely to be held accountable for your actions. If you're not going to get caught, then it means that you're disinhibited and you're much more likely to engage in behaviour. Prentice, Dunn and Rogers suggested that this was disinhibition, not necessarily de-individuation. And they talked about private self-awareness, and they said that this is when somebody behaves out of character and takes their cues of how to behave from the crowd. So it means that they're no longer making rational decisions, and aggression is much more likely to occur.